Warning, incoming goblin. Warning, incoming game. You get it, it's a reboot reference.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is a bit special as we ruled zeroed Vorthos, Steward of Myth, so MJ could play it. They keep Liliana, Heretical Healer, Luxior, Giada's Gift, Ketria Triome, Marsh Flats, Sidisi, Undead Vizier, Oath of Teferi, and Liliana the Veil. I'm still testing out my Otrimi deck, keeping a Breeding Pool, Temple of Mystery, Underground River, Nature's Lore, Vorthos, Apex of Forever, Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, and an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Nick has decided to partner up Alena and Brinelin, keeping a Tyrant's Familiar, Tromokratis, a Soul Ring, a Mountain, an Island, Temple of Epiphany, and Path of Ancestry. Max is still trying to get his Inquisitor Eisenhorn deck to work, keeping Otawara, Soaring City, Seagate Restoration, Tezzeret the Seeker, Mirror Box, Tome of Legends, and a Cryptic Command. MJ wins the die roll and starts us off. They play a tapped Ketria Triome. I also play a tapped land with a Temple of Mystery, scrying one, and passing. Nick follows our example, playing a tapped Path of Ancestry. Max has a Temple of his own, scrying one, and passing. Not wanting to break from the mold, MJ plays a Rogran Triome, and then pays 1 to cast Luxior, Giada's Gift. I draw for turn, and play an Urborg, and paying 2 mana cast to the Nature's Lore, and go to find an overgrown tomb, put it into play tapped. Nick plays an island, and casts Soul Ring. He then suspends a Deep Sea Kraken, passing to Max. Max draws, and plays a Swamp. He casts Tome of Legends, which removes a counter from the Kraken, and then enters with a counter on itself, and passes. MJ draws, and plays a Marsh Flats. They cast Lightning Greaves, and Nick ticks down the Kraken again. I play a Flooded Grove as my land for turn, and then play a Polywog Symbiote, or in this case, Baby Godzilla. The Kraken ticks down again, and I decide to take another counter off of it by casting an Ivy, and pass after that. Nick ticks down his Kraken on his upkeep, and draws. He plays a Mountain for turn, and then casts Alena, and passes to Max. Max draws, playing out Otawara, and then casts Rhystic Study. MJ taps 3 mana in their main phase for Phyrexian Altar, not paying the 1, and Max draws a card. With no land drop though, they have to pass. I mutate Otrimi on top of my Polywog, which copies and mutates onto Ivy as well, going underneath her to avoid the legendary rule. This lets me get a loot trigger off the Symbiote, and I then play a Breeding Pool, which I have come into play tapped. Moving to combat, I swing Ivy at Max and Otrimi at Nick. They both take the hits, and after that, I pass. Nick's Kraken comes off Suspend, and he pays for the Rhystic Study trigger, and then moves to draw for turn. He activates Alena, making 6 red mana, and is able to then cast a Tyrant's Familiar, paying for the Rhystic Study again, and goes to combat after he's done. He swings the Familiar at me and the Kraken at MJ, and chooses to deal 7 damage to Otrimi with the Tyrant's trigger. We then both take the hits, while I contemplate sending Otrimi to the graveyard. Nick passes, and I decide to have Otrimi go to the command zone. Max draws and plays a Seagate Reborn, taking 3. He then plays a Toxic Deluge, putting 6 into the X, and I feel relieved about putting Otrimi into my command zone, passing after that. MJ draws and plays a Cabal Coffers. Fueled by my Urborg, they're then able to play Vorthos. As their commander comes in, they name Liliana, and then equips a Lightning Greaves onto Vorthos, passing after that. I've got an island for turn, and cast a Dimir Signet, and pass after that. Nick plays an island, and then casts a Galecaster Colossus. Max draws, and also plays a Dimir Signet. He follows that with a mirror box, but has no land to play and has to pass. MJ plays a swamp for turn and activates the Cabal coffers again, this time playing Liliana the Veil. They downtick her to make Nick sacrifice a creature, and he responds by tapping the Galecaster Colossus to bounce the altar. MJ then plays out Liliana Heretical Healer and moves the Lightning Greaves onto Liliana before going to combat. He swings Vorthos and Liliana at Max, who takes the hit. MJ passes after that. I've got a Morphic Pool for turn, and then play out Emergent Ultimatum, paying the 1 for the study trigger. I find Scoot Swarm, Migratory Greathorn, and a Mind Leecher. I have Nick pick, and he gives me the Greathorn and Mind Leecher, and I cast them both, but sadly learn I can't mutate them onto each other. I sadly pass after that. Nick plays an island for turn, and then plays a Worn Power Stone, paying for the Rhystic Study trigger, and then passes after that. Max's turn has Inquisitor Eisenhorn coming in, and he gets a counter onto the Tome of Legends. He follows up with a Brainstorm, and then plays a Myriad Landscape, which comes in tapped. MJ draws for turn and casts Sidisi Undead Vizier, not paying the study, so Max gets to draw. Max draws a Fact or Fiction, which makes him a demon token from Eisenhorn. And Sidisi then enters, and has MJ sacrificing Vorthos to tutor for a card. This flips the Heretical Healer, and MJ then plays a Bloodstained Mire after they're done searching. They then tap the Mire for a black thanks to Urborg to equip Luxior onto the Heretical Healer. They uptick the healer to make us all discard a card, and equips the Lightning Greaves onto Sidisi. MJ then ticks up Liliana the Veil, and we all discard a card again, and they pass after that. I draw for turn, and mutate Vorthos onto the Mind Leecher. This has each of my opponents exiling their top card, and Max responds by activating his Tome of Legends to draw, and he reveals a sorcery and makes another demon token off of Eisenhorn, which does get to stick around thanks to the mirror box. I then play a Phyrexian Tower and go to combat. I swing my Vorthos at Liliana the Veil and take her out, and after that, I pass. Nick draws and plays an island. He then plays out Brinelin, and as his commander enters, he bounces Liliana Heretical Healer. Nick also gets a Scry trigger from the Path of Ancestry, and passes. Max has a Swamp for turn, and plays Lightning Greaves, and equips them onto his commander. He then casts a Hostage Taker, exiling MJ's Luxior as it comes in, and then plays it for himself. Going to combat, he swings a Demon and Eisenhorn at me, and the other Demon token goes at Nick. I block Max's commander with my Greathorn, and Nick and I both take the demon damage. After that, Max passes. MJ draws and moves the Greaves over to the zombie token, and then replays Liliana Heretical Healer. They follow up with an Oath of Teferi, exiling Sidisi until the end of turn. MJ continues to play musical chairs with the Greaves, and moves them to Liliana before moving to combat. They swing her at Max, who blocks with the Hostage Taker, but MJ gains 2 life either way. Going to their end step, Sidisi comes back, and MJ has it sacrifice itself, transforming the Heretical Healer once more, and making a zombie token, plus gets a tutor for a card to hand. They pass after that. I draw and mutate a Gemraiser onto the Vorthos stack, destroying the Rhystic Study while paying the 1 for it. The Mind Leecher exiles everyone's top card again, and I then play one of Nick's islands off the Mind Leecher before moving to combat. I swing Vorthos at Max, and he activates the Tome of Legends to see if he'll hit an instant or sorcery. He doesn't, so he doesn't get to make a blocker, and takes the 6 instead. Nick's main phase has him casting an Artisan of Kozilek, bouncing a zombie token from MJ, and reanimating the Diluvian Primordial from his graveyard. This lets him cast Quandrix Command from my graveyard to bounce my Vorthos stack, and he picks the mode to put 2 +1/+1 counters onto the Primordial as well. In response to the targeting, I cast my Paradoxical Outcome, bouncing my stack and the Migratory Greathorn, letting me draw 4. The Primordial also targets Max's Factor Fiction, and I make the piles, and Nick decides to pick the one with Thrix. Moving to combat, Nick swings Brinelin at MJ, who chumps with their last zombie token. Nick passes after that. Max draws and plays an island. He then plays Karn, Scion of Urza, and equips it with Luxior and then the Greaves. He downticks his Planeswalker to make a construct token, and then goes to combat. He swings his 2 demons at Nick, and Eisenhorn and Karn at me. Nick blocks 1 demon with a Primordial, and we all then take the rest of the hits. With nothing else, Max passes. MJ draws and plays an Ichor Moon Gauntlet, and then plays out Doubling Season, getting to put another loyalty counter onto Liliana thanks to the Doubling Season triggering the Gauntlet's pseudo-proliferate. With the Oath out, MJ is then able to uptick Liliana, adding more counters, and is then able to ultimate her to get the emblem. With nothing else, MJ passes. My turn has Toski coming in, and I mutate the Great Horn onto it to get a land into play tapped. I then mutate the Insatiable Hemophage onto it, draining everyone for 2, and finding another land. With nothing else, I pass. Nick draws and goes to combat. He swings the Artisan of Kozilek and Brinelin at MJ, who sacrifices 2 lands to the Annihilator trigger. MJ then takes 16 damage, and in Nick's post-combat main phase, he evokes Spite Bellows, bouncing the construct with Brinelin, and then dealing 6 damage to a demon. Nick then sacrifices the Spite Bellows, which has MJ gaining control of it thanks to Liliana's emblem, and Max draws a card off the Tome of Legends before cracking his Myriad Landscape as Nick passes turn. Max draws and downticks Karn again for another Construct token. He then plays out Propaganda and a Trailblazer's Boots. Max then moves the Greaves to the Construct and swings the 10-10 at Nick. Nick takes the hit, and Max then moves the Greaves back onto Karn before passing turn. MJ draws and plays Liliana Dreadhorde General. This has Max responding with a Cryptic Command, bouncing Nick's Brinelin and countering the spell. Going to combat, MJ sings a Spite Bellows at Nick, who's agreed to block, ironically as a spite move to take out one of Max's creatures as the Spite Bellows dies. Nick blocks with his Diluvian Primordial, and MJ kills the Hostage Taker, with the Spite Bellows dying. On their end step, the Hostage Taker and Spite Bellows come back in, with the Hostage Taker exiling the Construct token. I draw and play a Forest. I cast River's Rebuke and target Max, and he draws a card of the Tome before his board gets bounced. I then mutate the Mind Leecher onto the Toski stack, exiling everyone's top card, grabbing a basic, and draining everyone for 3. Going to combat, I swing the stack at Nick, who takes the hit, and I pass. Nick replays Brinelin in his main phase, bouncing my mutate stack again. He then goes to combat and swings the Artisan and Primordial at me for 17. I have no blocks, so I sacrifice 2 lands and take the hit. With nothing else, Nick passes. Max plays a War Room and taps 1 for a Soul Ring. He then replays Dimir Signet, and then replays Propaganda, the Mirror Box, and Eisenhorn. He passes after that. MJ draws and plays a Polluted Delta, and then recasts Vorthos. They name Liliana again, and then play Contamination, and then Luxior. Going to combat, they swing the Spite Bellows at Nick, who's forced to block it. The Spite Bellows dies, dealing 6 to Eisenhorn as it leaves play. Moving to their end step, the Spite Bellows comes back under MJ's control. I draw and play a Baleful Strix. I draw a card as it enters, and follow up with an Arcane Signet. I then mutate the Mind Leecher onto the Baleful Strix, exiling everyone's top card. I then mutate the Hemophage onto it, draining everyone for 2 and exiling everyone's top card again. I pass after that. Nick draws and is facing a lethal mutate from me, and goes to combat. He swings everything at me, and I block with his Artisan with the Baleful Strix to trade before dying. However, Still locked up under the contamination, Nick passes turn, while MJ gets an Artisan of Kozilek on the end step. Max draws and replays Karn, down taking the Walker to make a Construct token. He then replays a Lightning Greaves and Trailblazer's Boots, and equips them both onto the Construct before moving to combat. He swings the Construct at MJ, who takes the hit for 6. Entering Max's end step, MJ sacrifices the Polluted Delta, losing 1 for Savai Triome. MJ sacrifices Vorthos to the Contamination on their upkeep, and draws. Going to combat, they swing the Spite Bellows, Hostage Taker, and Artisan at Max for exactly 16. Max casts Thirst for Knowledge in response, but hits nothing, and dies as a result. Nick takes one look at the board, and sees that he's locked under Contamination, and scoops it up as well. Game review time. So this was a fun one, and I really love how many pairings Nick is able to come up with thanks to the Commander Legend Partners cards. I think Alena and Brinelin was great, as it allowed him to make a ton of mana in Izzet, casting Krakens and big creatures. I'm always about resolving big silly spells, and this deck hit that spot. Max's Inquisitor Eisenhorn deck, I'm not too sure why, but it seemed to scare a lot of us. I think the mirror box allowing him to keep those legendary demon tokens around was creating a real false sense of fear. On the whole, he wasn't really doing much other than drawing cards occasionally and making a token here and there. Unfortunately for the rest of the table, MJ had 2 huge back-to-back turns, the first of which was getting the emblem with Liliana, and the second was resolving the contamination. They were able to lock us out of mana, not to mention every time a creature died, which was really frankly the only way that we were going to take them out, and frankly as soon as contamination resolved, I think we were beat. Otrimi continues to be a lot of fun, as I just love the mutate mechanic. I know it's particularly vulnerable, but that doesn't mean I won't have a good time with it. I'm a really big fan of some of the cards in the deck that I've been able to play now, like Mind Leecher just stealing so many cards this game. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.